Pre-feasibility analysis of energy efficiency measures for buildings and factories with RETScreen Expert. Part 3. Understanding the output. In the previous videos, I looked at an archetype of a metal fabrication plant, which I located in London, Ontario. I showed how different input sections have been used to describe the building envelope, ventilation system, and various electric and hot water loads. In this video, I will show a range of ways to examine the resulting energy and fuel consumption that RETScreen has calculated for this facility. As shown in the first video of this series, the cost, emissions, and financial analyses of the overall project are found on the tabs bearing those names. But results related to energy and fuel consumption are found on the Energy tab, and those are what I will look at now. The two main results tables are found in the Summary section of the navigation pane. You can also access these tables from Step 5 in the ribbon menu. The rows of the Include Measure table correspond to the list of forms in the navigation pane under the Equipment, End Use, and Optimize Supply sections. You will note that, similarly to the navigation pane, these three sections are separated by black lines to remind us that they are very different. Only the rows for the End Use section generate demands for heating, cooling, and electricity. The Equipment and Optimize Supply sections provide heating, cooling, and in some cases electricity to satisfy those demands. The left side of the table displays results related to energy. The right, results related to finance, summarizing the incremental initial costs, fuel costs, and incremental operation and maintenance costs. I can choose to display one, the other, or both using the Show drop-down list at the top of the table. Either way, the simple payback period for the proposed case versus the base case is calculated, and a checkbox allows me to select or deselect the row. Keep in mind that, as elsewhere in RETScreen, results are for a typical year unless some other time period is indicated. The energy and fuel consumption are for a year, so are the fuel cost savings and the incremental O&M savings. The incremental initial costs are evidently a one-time expenditure. Be very careful to make sure you understand what this Include Measure checkbox does. Deselecting a row does not eliminate the corresponding form from consideration in the analysis. Rather, it indicates that the proposed measure is not to be implemented. Instead, the description of the proposed case measure will be ignored and the base case description will be applied for both cases. Since there is no change going from the base case to the proposed case, the difference in terms of energy, fuel, and costs is zero. But that does not mean that the equipment has been eliminated. It is still there in the form described for the base case, affecting the energy and fuel consumption for the facility. Just under the Show drop-down list at the top of the table, there are two more drop-down lists that allow the user to configure what is displayed in the energy results at the left of the table. The unit switch is pretty straightforward. It tells RETScreen in which units to display results for heating, cooling, and electricity. The drop-down list to its left, however, merits more explanation. It selects between results for the base case, results for the proposed case, and savings. But 6 options are shown. The first 3 are for energy, and the second 3 are for fuel. Let's be very clear about RETScreen's distinction between energy and fuel. Energy is a requirement for heating, cooling, or electric power. Fuel is the energy content of the fuel that is consumed within the building to meet that requirement. For end uses of electricity, energy and fuel are the same. For heating and cooling, however, the fuel consumption is equal to the energy requirement divided by the efficiency. I'll give a few examples. Lighting is an end use of electricity, so I would expect the fuel, which in RETScreen's accounting includes electricity, to be the same as the energy. This is indeed the case. In contrast, the office building envelope form shows different results for heating and cooling when switching between fuel and energy. If I grab a calculator and compare the two, I'll see that the energy requirement for heating is 80% as large as the fuel consumption, and for cooling, it is 310% of the fuel consumption. These are, of course, the seasonal efficiencies of the office space heating system and the air conditioning system. Thus, fuel is equal to energy divided by the efficiency with which fuel is converted to end use. This has some interesting consequences for the equipment section. To understand these, let's look at just the heating subsection of the Include Measure table. I can do this by clicking on that heading in the navigation pane. When I use the drop-down list to show results for energy in the base case, energy in the proposed case, or energy saved, the heating and cooling columns remain blank. This makes sense. Energy refers to a thermal requirement, and these heating systems do not require heat. But the results for fuel in the base case and fuel in the proposed case are also blank. Obviously, these natural gas-fired heaters consume fuel, but this fuel consumption already appears as the fuel requirement for the end-use equipment supplied by these heating systems. The fuel consumption would be double counted if it appeared both here and under the building envelope, ventilation, and hot water forms. For fuel saved, however, the heating column is no longer blank, but 0. Note that the fuel consumed in the base and proposed case was left blank, not 0. So this 0 is not there to indicate the difference between the proposed case and the base case fuel consumption. It must reflect something else. That something else is fuel savings due to differences in the efficiency of the heating system in the proposed and base case. Opening the office space heating form, the seasonal efficiency is currently 80% for both. So the fuel savings associated with the proposed case office space heating system are 0. If I temporarily change the seasonal efficiency to 85% in the proposed case, the fuel saved by this change is 2.4 megawatt hours per year. Below the Include Measure table, each archetype includes an image, showing a rough plan of the facility, and a Notes page. The Notes page outlines the improvements studied in the proposed case. The user can edit the image and the Notes page and, through the checkboxes in the Options section of the ribbon menu, choose whether or not they appear. The End-Use Pie Chart and the Target functionality, both open from the ribbon menu, are closely linked to the Include Measure table. What is displayed in the End-Use Pie Chart is controlled by the drop-down list at the top of the Include Measure table. The wedges of the chart show the energy or fuel consumption or savings of the most significant groupings of equipment. The table below the pie chart provides numerical detail. Clicking on the Target button opens a summary that compares the base case and the proposed case in terms of the fuel consumption, fuel cost, and GHG emissions. But if the Filter down arrow is clicked, it can do more than this. A criterion for selecting or rejecting the proposed case for each row of the Include Measure table can be established. For example, one might want to reject all proposed case options with a simple payback longer than 3.5 years. Clicking on the Calculate button deselects the measures that do not achieve this simple payback. Be careful, however. If there are tightly linked rows in the Include Measure table, the blind application of the criterion may deselect one proposed case without consideration for the linked row. For example, here the proposed case for the office space ventilation has been rejected, but the proposed case for the fan associated with that ventilation upgrade has been retained. This probably does not make sense. The Include Measure table shows results for each form separately. In contrast, the Comparison summary lumps the output of all the forms together, but separates results by fuel or end use. For example, the table across the top of the Comparison summary compares the base case and proposed case fuel consumption, with one row for natural gas and a second for electricity. This table makes it clear that electricity costs are far more significant for this plant than are natural gas costs. In this table, The fuel consumption is given in the units which were originally selected on the electricity and fuels form. Here, that is cubic meters. There are many places in RETScreen where you can find fuel consumption in common energy units like megawatt hours or gigajoules, but this is one of the few places where you can find it in the units that the fuel is sold in, regardless of whether this is a common energy unit. I'll look at the project verification table in the next video, and instead skip to the savings table. I'll first select energy from the drop-down list. The heating, cooling, electricity, and total energy requirements for both the base case and the proposed case are given in the common unit selected. The energy saved row displays the difference between the base case and the proposed case. It is also shown as a percentage of the base case consumption. When fuel consumption is selected, the table shows the fuel consumption, as one would expect, but also adds two columns at the far right. The plan column shows the fuel consumption that was estimated for the base case and the proposed case in the benchmark section of the facility tab. The variance shows the percentage difference between the findings of the feasibility study model on the energy page and the benchmark estimates. Currently, the variance is 0, indicating that the benchmark estimates in the Facility tab have been set to match the Energy tab estimates. If, in the Include Measure table, I add the solar systems to the proposed case, when I return to the Comparison Savings table, I see that the Energy tab's estimate for the proposed case now consumes 13% less fuel than the Facility tab's estimate. I can sync the Facility tab's numbers with these results from the Energy tab by clicking on the Update Plan button. Obviously, the variance is then 0. Most of the data from this table and the summary table at the top of the comparison page can be viewed in graphical form by looking at the energy savings and fuel summary of the dashboard. The dashboard is opened from the Options section of the ribbon menu. It displays key results from different RETScreen tabs and floats above whatever RETScreen tab is currently open, even when changing between tabs. Selecting the energy savings results, I can essentially view the energy or fuel consumption data from the energy savings table on the comparison page as either a bar graph or a pie chart. The fuel summary provides graphic representations of the data from the summary table. The benchmark table is closely linked to the savings table just above it. Changing between energy and fuel in the drop-down list in the savings table controls what is displayed in both tables. Indeed, the same information is provided in the two tables, but in the benchmark table, all results are divided by a benchmark denominator. In this archetype, the results are shown in kilowatt hours per employee, based on an estimate of 95 employees, as indicated on the facility page. I can change the benchmark that is used. For instance, if it made sense to show heating, cooling, electricity, and total fuel consumption in terms of megajoules per square meter of floor space, I could do this. Based on the building envelope forms, I'd estimate that the floor area is 4,600 square meters and enter this. Clicking on the Copy from Facility button would resync this table with what appears in the Benchmark section of the Facility tab. When displaying fuel consumption, the benchmark table compares the total fuel consumption from the Energy tab with the benchmark from the Facility tab. For example, the benchmark is 68,000 kilowatt hours per employee. The base case and proposed case fuel consumption, as determined in the Energy tab, are 52% and 70% lower than this, respectively. As you can see, there are many ways to explore RETScreen's outputs. In the next and final video of this series, I'll use some of the tables and features introduced in this presentation to help reconcile the archetype with past utility bills for electricity and fuel consumption.